Right, good morning everyone, and welcome to the Bible study. I can't hear anyone at the moment. Can uh,
Hello, I'm
Oh,
here.
you're here, brilliant. Right, okay, we've got some noise. That's great. I'm just yeah, it should be fine. Right, we had a few technical difficulties just as we launched there, so sorry about that. Those online. We're looking this morning at Daniel in the lion's den, Daniel chapter 6, and it's 28 verses, and I'm going to recommend
You-
we go as far as the end of 13 and then someone else reads 14 onwards. Sorry, David, you were saying something?
I was just going to say your mouth is out of sync with your sound.
Okay, that's it's a kung fu movie over here. There we go.
Well, your mouth starts moving and then the sound comes later.
Yeah, that's fine. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Um, but we're we crashed just earlier, so it's good to be moving, at least. So Daniel 6. I need someone to pray, and maybe two people to read. I'm willing to read, so I don't know if anyone's willing to pray and anyone else willing to read.
I'll read because your sound is slightly gurgling.
Okay, okay. Shall I pray? Here with the gurgling sound. There we go. Um, Lord, I just thank you for today. I thank you for this opportunity to enjoy your word and enjoy you. And so, Lord, I just pray you come bless us as we look at this. Come reveal things on your heart to us as we look at your word. In
Mm.
Jesus' name, amen. Okay.
Okay. So, chapter 6, and you'd like me to go through to end of 13, yeah?
Yep.
Is that right?
And then someone else can read on from there, or I can. So happy enough. Anyone else like to read? Okay. I'll
No,
I'll
so the
I'll go for it then.
thumbs for Paul.
Everyone's muted, I think. So yeah, I'll read on, David. So go for it.
Okay. Okay, it pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 satraps to be over the whole kingdom, and over these three governors, of whom Daniel was one, that the satraps might give account to them, so that the king would suffer no loss. Then this Daniel distinguished himself above the governors and satraps, because an excellent spirit was in him. And the king gave thought to setting him over the whole realm. So the governors and satraps sought to find some charge against Daniel concerning the kingdom, but they could find no charge or fault, because he was faithful, nor was there any error or fault found in him. Then these men said, "We shall not find any charge against this Daniel unless we find it against him concerning the law of his God." So these governors and satraps thronged before the king and said thus to him: "King Darius, live forever. All the governors of the kingdom and administrators and satraps, the counselors and advisers, have consulted together to establish a royal statute and to make a firm decree that whoever petitions any god or man for 30 days except you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions. Now, O king, establish the decree and sign the writing so that it cannot be changed according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which does not alter." Therefore, King Darius signed the written decree. Now, when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went home, and in his upper room, with his windows open towards Jerusalem, he knelt down on his knees 3 times that day and prayed and gave thanks before his God, as was his custom since early days. Then these men assembled and found Daniel praying and making supplications before his God. And they went before the king and spoke concerning the king's decree. Have you not signed a decree that every man who petitions any god or man within 30 days, except you, O king, should be cast into the den of lions? The king answered and said, the thing is true, according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which does not alter. So they answered and said before the king that Daniel, that Daniel, who is one of the captives from Judah, does not show due regard for you, O king, or for the decree that you have signed, but make his petition 3 times a day. Shall I carry on?
Yeah, no, I can go for it. Then the
Okay.
king, when he heard these words, was much distressed, and set his mind to deliver Daniel. And he labored until the sun went down to rescue him. Then these men came by agreement to the king, and said to the king, know, O king, that this is the law of the Medes and Persians, that no injunction or ordinance that the king establishes can be changed. Then the king commanded, and Daniel was brought and cast into the den of lions. The king declared to Daniel, may your God, whom you serve continually, deliver you. And a stone was brought and laid on the mouth of the den. And the king sealed it with his own signet and with the signet of his lords, that nothing might be changed concerning Daniel. Then the king went into his palace and spent the night fasting. No diversions were brought to him, and sleep fled from him. Then at the break of day the king rose and went in haste to the den of lions. As he came near the den where Daniel was, he cried out in a tone of anguish. The king declared to Daniel, O Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to deliver you from the lions? Then Daniel said to the king, O king, live forever. My God sent his angel to shut the lions' mouths, and they have not harmed me, because I was found blameless before him. And also before you, O king, I have done no harm. Then the king was exceedingly glad, and commanded that Daniel be taken out of the den. So Daniel was taken out of the den, and no kind of harm was found on him, because he trusted in his God. The king commanded that those men who had maliciously accused Daniel were brought and cast into the den of lions, they, their wives, and their children. And before they reached the bottom of the den, the lions overpowered them and broke all their bones in pieces. Then Darius wrote to the peoples and the nations and languages that dwell on the earth, peace be multiplied to you. I make a decree that all in my royal dominion people are to tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, enduring forever. His kingdom shall never be destroyed. His dominion shall be to the end. He delivers and rescues. He works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth. He who has saved Daniel from the power of the lions. And so this Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. Okay, so just as a little bit of a little setting the scenes. Daniel, we started with his friends fasting. He was being assessed by Nebuchadnezzar as someone who could be significant in the kingdom. And then from there, he interpreted Nebuchadnezzar's first dream, told him the dream and interpreted it. And then we have the stories of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who go through fire rather than bow down to an idol. And then you have here Daniel then interprets Nebuchadnezzar's second dream, which has a massive impact on Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar has this season of wildness, and then is restored. And then we enter we end up with Belshazzar and the writing on the wall we looked at yesterday. And he had no real regard of God, and as a result was taken down. Now the flow of kings, let me just say, so Daniel's been in high office, and here's the guys he's gone through. Nebuchadnezzar was taken down by one of his guys and replaced. And that guy then appointed his son, who we think was Belshazzar, and Belshazzar Then spoke of Nebuchadnezzar as his dad, kind of thing, my father Nebuchadnezzar, or your father Nebuchadnezzar, because the greatness of Nebuchadnezzar, he was trying to hold on to some of that. Then we find after that, yesterday it finished with the line that he was actually killed that night and the Medes and the Persians took over. And the person that took over was Darius, and Darius is not found in any historical manuscripts. So they think the name Darius was attributed either to Cyrus or attributed to one of his generals who took over as king over Babylon under Cyrus. Cyrus had his reign in Persia before Babylon fell here. And so that's just to give you the succession and the turmoil that Daniel is ministering into. So he's not of high regard when it comes to Belshazzar. When it comes to Darius, we see he's risen to the top again. And Darius seems to be a guy who has some knowledge. He's not someone who has just come into a kingdom, right, new broom sweeps clean, that's it, none of the old stuff. No, he's looked into the old stuff. He's looked into what happens. His prayer at the end here shows he understood what happened to Nebuchadnezzar. Actually, there shows a softness towards the things of God in Darius that there wasn't in Belshazzar. And so you've got this kind of thing of Daniel bringing something of God, constantly serving God, but he has gone through not only the turmoil of exile, but he's been through the turmoil of several leaders that he's been serving in this time. And actually here we find he rises to the top, but there's jealousy and people try and take him down, and God wins through for him and ends up with Darius declaring who God is and telling people that they need to honor this. So I think it's an incredible story. There's a quick overview, fly through, and I'll open it up and see what touched people's hearts, what's on people's minds, and we'll look through it. So go for it.
Yeah, which version were you reading?
The ESV.
Yeah, the NIV also. What struck me was verse 16, where in the NIV and your version it says, "The king said to Daniel, 'May your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you.'" Yeah, in the King James and also in the New American Standard Version, it's much more definite. It said, "But the king spoke, saying to Daniel, 'Your God, whom you serve continually, will deliver you.'" So there's a sort of a faith in there of Darius,
yeah,
of the power of the God that Daniel serves.
yeah,
It's not just an offhand sort of, well, I hope your God will save you. It's he will save you, and he no doubt had heard about the furnace episode with the three guys.
yeah,
So yeah, I think he's not this event in the den does not change his mind. It reinforces his faith
yeah.
of who the God of Daniel is.
Well, so you're saying that Darius made a faith statement there
Yeah,
about
yeah.
Daniel. Okay, so I've never seen that before in this, which means I've normally gone off the NIV or ESV, but it's interesting, yeah. And so that's the Naz, is it?
That's in the new the NASB,
Nazba.
New
Yeah,
American Standard Bible.
yeah,
But also in the New King James as well.
yeah,
So I
yeah, yeah.
presume it's in the King James.
Yeah. Sometimes the New King James tries to stick with the Old King James,
Yeah.
and there's different manuscripts that's based on as opposed to modern. But the New King James uses those manuscripts, but sometimes stays close to the line of the Old King James rather than vary off. So I don't know what the Naz has done, but it's interesting. So there may be that this is where you get some of the differences between the versions of the Bible if we start getting technical on it. But I think it's interesting.
It's also as you prayed, it's what is God saying to you in this, and what's the Spirit saying, as well as the the people who study these scriptures.
Yeah.
And to me, it's because it's not just the episode in the lion's den that persuades Darius to honor God.
Yeah.
There was a something going on before
Yeah.
that, and then he has the courage to stand up
Yeah.
and to say that, to
Yeah.
say the what
I,
he wrote.
I think before you appoint someone like Daniel high up in the country, you want to know
Yeah,
who he is and what he's about.
yeah, yeah.
Darius will have done a thorough investigation. He's 62 years old when he takes over. Darius is. He's been around. It's not his first. It's not his first rodeo.
Yeah.
And so in that he's a wise man. He seems to be, and he appears to be diligent in what he does. And there seems to be a diligence about the Medes and Persians that there was in Nebuchadnezzar, but there wasn't in the people following him. Um, and you've got this kind of discipline and diligence, and the fact that their law can't be changed. There's a lot of things there that are very powerful. And so I think, that sense of faith, he's picked up this faith, but maybe it's affected him more than that. And actually, there's something going on there. We don't see. So I looked in the commentary earlier on Daniel from the IVP, and the guy in there says what we don't see with Darius, comparing Darius and Nebuchadnezzar. Daniel seems to be in on the inner thoughts of what's going on in Nebuchadnezzar in a
Mm.
way that is slightly removed with Darius. So Darius isn't letting him know all his, there's an openness with Nebuchadnezzar that's even beyond that of Darius. But Darius's understanding is so much sharper than Nebuchadnezzar, and he gets straight to the point. So if that is the case, your God will protect you. I mean, he's praying and fasting for him. I mean, you think if the big, I always think of these guys as CEO type big organizer multinational organizations. You think, what's his salary worth for him to spend a whole day trying to rescue Daniel? In terms of trying to run an empire, that's amazing to take a day out to try and rescue Daniel. He's so valuable to Darius. Darius knows he's a key guy. He doesn't want to lose him, and he's fighting for him, even though he signed the letter without realizing the intent of the guys. And the other
Yeah.
thing is, these guys have set Daniel up very well, very subtly, and 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 I think people do that by following trends. Why has Darius signed the document? Right, he signed the document because he's just taken over a new empire, and he wants to know people are with him. So one of the ways of testing that is, will they obey this decree or not? It'll give him a good understanding. It'd be like doing a YouGov poll on how things are in the area he's ruling. And the advisors know he wants to do a YouGov poll type thing, so they want to let's pass this law. It's harmless. I mean, it's 30 days. You just have to hold off praying to a deity. I'm sure you can do that. That will show how committed they are to you. You can imagine the way they spin things to get him to agree to this, and then know that Daniel is absolutely solid and they can take him down with it. And it's very interesting. Darius is gutted when he realizes that Daniel's headed for the lion's den. He has no idea of the clever scheme they've cooked, and he's annoyed about it because he throws them into the into the lions afterwards. And so he didn't have to decree for that; he could just do it. And so there's something in him of he's been played by these guys, and he's not going to be played. Boom, that's the king.
It's interesting, isn't it, how this relationship between Daniel and the various kings, including this Darius, although he doesn't sort of he honors the ruler, he honors the people that he's working for, yet he doesn't compromise his relationship with God.
Mm.
And I think there's something there for us as well, because uh, Daniel doesn't sort of come against the king, but he goes with the king, but doesn't compromise his faith. He doesn't
Yeah.
compromise his relationship with God. And I think in today's world, we if we're not careful, we try and in order to try and work with uh, whoever's ruling us, um, we can compromise our relation, what God says. I'm not thinking of anybody in particular here, but it's it's just it's so important that the number one thing that we have is our relationship with God.
Mm-hmm.
And he does say honor the people who are over you, because they've been appointed by God. But it's you've got to keep there's that sort of challenge of when the people, and I mean I'm thinking about various rules and laws that are going through Parliament at the moment. They're always trying to uh, appease the culture that's developing, um, rather than doing what is right. And it's going to be probably difficult for us to actually maintain our relation, our values. But we have to. The number one thing is our relationship with God and what God is saying.
Yeah.
Um, and it might get us into trouble at some stage. But
Yeah. And and I think the difficulty is, I think the term is zeitgeist, isn't it?
mm,
In some ways, the kind of flavour of culture, of where culture's going and what's happening, what's the latest, where are things now? The kind of flow with that, we've got to be careful with this, because
yeah,
actually our laws have not moved as much as the media want us to think they have.
yeah,
And in actual fact, there's a lot of things with this, with trends and so on. What I notice with Daniel is we've got an example in someone, and sorry, it looks like a headband. It's the sun, um, but the we've got an example in someone here who has been in all sorts of cultural changes, leadership wise, has
mm,
managed to hold his all, built on his principles, pushes through, and manages to bring a sense of God to every single leader in the kingdom he's brought captive to.
mm,
Brings revelation right in. God opens the door, there's dreams, there's visions, there's writing on walls with hands, there's all those things, but Daniel is right there. His consistency, his witness enables him to bring things into settings, and he's dependable. And what I think here, if you wanted on your CV a kind of well done, from someone who doesn't necessarily follow Christian things but actually recognizes your faith, Daniel here gets incredible applause. The guy knows it's because Daniel serves his God and he wants to do right by his God, he'll do right by me. And actually, he's
yeah,
got an integrity in him that Darius has seen, recognized, and knows that that's connected to his love of God. And like
mm,
you're saying about the relationship with God is the key for everything. Our walk with God is at the center of everything we need to bring. And I think
mm.
that's so important, and so powerful in this.
Yeah, there was somebody in Parliament last week who was commenting on the Anglicans not moving into having uh, same-sex marriages,
Mm-hmm.
and he said that the church needs to move into the modern, come towards the modern culture and change. And I thought, you don't really understand, do you? You can't just change God's perspective on things. It's not about moving with the culture; it's moving with what God's calling us to do.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah, I think it was an example this morning on TV. I only heard about, but there was someone on there saying, well, there's lots of different versions of the Bible. Can't we just update it, kind of?
Yeah.
And someone kindly pointed out to the you know religiously illiterate interviewer that actually it's not a version of the Bible, it's a translation of the
Yeah,
Bible.
that's
You
right.
can't just go, oh yeah, we'll just top these bits out and just change this all, and oh, it's all fine. And it's not the latest version. Oh, we've got the latest version here. No, no, it's a translation. It goes right back. It's built off a
Yeah.
base. And so, but there's a lot of illiteracy around, and that doesn't help any of the discussion on these issues. And I don't want to get too into the Church of England today, because that's their business in some ways, and they need to sort it out. And I'm sure they will. There's a lot of work going on.
I pray they
Um,
will.
yeah, I think yeah, and I think what we need to also be bear in mind, there is the reporting on that is different to the discussions, and so people report on the highlights or what they see as the highlights, but actually that is an editorial thing on what's actually happening and what
But you
actually
can also
happens.
you can
Yeah.
also listen to the speeches.
Can you? Have you been listening to
Yeah.
them? I haven't, but
Well,
yeah,
I'd
yeah,
only listened to that one, but
yeah,
anyhow,
yeah.
there we go.
Right. So moving on with this, I think there's some things here with Daniel that we really learn. His integrity with prayer,
Mm.
and and the fact that his prayer faces Jerusalem. He's waiting to go back. He knows he's in exile. He knows he's built of something else, for something else. All of his work in Babylon, seeking the peace and prosperity of the city to which I've carried you, if it prospers, so shall you, words of Jeremiah. Living by those things, putting his best into the nation of Babylon, and now Babylon's been taken over by the Medes and Persians. But that sense of seeking the best for where he is, and actually he'll be blessed as a result. But he opens the windows to Jerusalem 3 times a day and prays, and that's a very set discipline, and I think remarkable. Someone as busy as Daniel, that is non-negotiable. Just like the food was a non-negotiable right back at the beginning. So I don't know if anyone's got any comment on Daniel's prayer life or anything like that.
Moving on.
Oh, you're there, Carolyn. Go for it.
No, I was saying moving on.
Moving on from where? Sorry.
Move it on. I think she said.
Oh, moving
Move,
on from prayer. You mean?
moving on. Yeah.
There's nothing to say on prayer. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, I wasn't listening properly. Sorry.
Okay, no problem, no problem. It might be my voice, because I understand it's a little bit jagged this morning due to some technical issues. So it might be that as well. But I think this, looking at the story here of Daniel, I want us, just before we go on, and I'm not going to go on to the next chapter yet, but I think the remarkable thing that God rescued him from the lion's den, and actually it wasn't that the lions weren't hungry. It wasn't that, but that someone had set up a lion's den as a punishment for people. That's rather cruel. Um, but there also was a whole load of things about the worship of lions and the thought about lions, and the whole thing of capturing lions and fighting lions and taking on lions was a massive concept. And if you go to the British Museum, you can see the walls with all the lions on them, and people fighting lions, and this is all imagery of the might and the victory of the Babylonians. So to have a lion's den would be the ultimate, as far as they were concerned, and the ultimate punishment. And so, there's some very interesting angles on this that we don't see at first glance, but a quick trip to the museum would help. Now, just before we go into other things, what I'd like us to do is just think. Now, we've had a look through Daniel 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're on Daniel 6 today. We've finished that pretty much. So we've been told a story, first in Hebrew for the first chapter, then in Aramaic for these chapters, and it's going to go back to Hebrew towards the end of the book. And we've got to look at the story we've been told. Why are we being told these particular stories of Daniel's time in Babylon? You know, why is it that Daniel's we've been told that him and his friends were selected among the exiles. We're told that Daniel and his friends excelled beyond the others. We're then told that only Daniel, and he got his friends to pray as well, only Daniel could interpret and tell the king his dream. We're then shown Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fire, standing up against idolatry for what they believed, and actually being raised to even higher positions than they were in before as a result of that. And another great statement about God coming through their witness. Then we've got Daniel again interpreting the king's dream. That doesn't go well for the king, but at the end, a magnificent demonstration of who God is by the king. And then you've got Belteshazzar, who's dishonorable towards God and gone before nightfall, or gone during the night, and replaced by Darius and this new kingdom. In this new kingdom, Daniel's picked to be the top. People try and take him down. He comes through again. What is that whole? Why are we being told all these stories? What's the common thread in these stories? What is it that's building towards the next part of the book?
I was just thinking, whenever situation you're in, God can use you, can't you?
Yeah.
If you stay close to Him, because
Yeah.
whatever Daniel went through, God rescued him. He was with him, and his witness actually brought people to faith, didn't it? So I think whatever situation we're in, it might be really awful, but He's with us, because in the line that it says the angel was there. I don't know if that was an angel, or if it was Jesus there, because Jesus was with the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, wasn't he, in the fiery furnace, walking around with them?
Yeah.
And it reminded me really of those miners that got trapped underground quite a few years ago now, and they actually said there was somebody else in there with them. They didn't know, and that was Jesus, rescuing them, and they all came out really believing the Lord. It was amazing. So it still happens today, just so wherever we face, coming to our own lives now, it just shows you that God is there, and He always work His purposes out, because obviously Daniel was going to be used in prophecy for the future, the last days and things like that. So and Daniel proved himself over and over, didn't he? Because he was so faithful and so stood up and wasn't afraid to speak out for God, and God used him. So I think if we're like that, then God can use us in any situation that we're in. Having said that, it's easy, but he he sort of was really, and then he proved himself. So then each king sort of in the end believed in him, because he's got a legacy, hasn't he, of what happened and everything. So that's what I was thinking.
I think spot on. So in any circumstance, it's going for God, having the willingness to say, well, even if it doesn't happen, I'm not going to alter my focus on God. There's something of a sense of following God, being connected with God, not just following a set of abstract laws, but actually step by step following what he's leading in every circumstance, walking with him day by day, fellowshipping with him, actually living right, having an integral part of our lives. That flows through and shines out in every circumstance. Daniel's through lots of different leaders, doesn't matter. He shines through. Everything he does shines through. There's something very powerful there. And so maybe instead of thinking through the power battles we want to have at times about who rules, who reigns, who calls the shots, our attitude needs to be, how do we serve the King of Kings and his kingdom that will never be destroyed, never fail. and bringing that to whatever we do each day is the most powerful thing. I mean, I think there's some of these lessons here in Daniel. There's probably richer lessons as well, but there's some of these things that go just so deep. And actually, it didn't matter who was in power. It didn't matter what stupid laws they made. It didn't matter about some of these things. Daniel was serving God step by step, and God made way for Daniel. God opened ways, and the prophecy that, or the dream that Nebuchadnezzar had at first of all these kingdoms, the gold, the silver, the bronze, the iron, the clay and iron, statue, was shattered by a great big boulder cut from a mountain, and that boulder was the kingdom of God, which takes down every single empire there is. And this is what we're seeing in Daniel and his friends. No matter which empire it is, no matter what stage it's at, they rise into the top. There's an overcoming of the kingdom of God. And I think that's a very powerful message. David?
Yeah, I'm sort of coming back and taking a helicopter view of this, the whole of the story of the Israelites coming through, and of course they're in exile because they were in idolatry. They were not complying with what God had said that they should do in the law, and so that they had to actually go out into exile for the 70 years, as we'll discover further on. I won't spoil the future, but here we've got a chap, Daniel, who, in spite of the whole nation being put out into exile, Daniel is almost like a Christ-like figure who brings the message of God into that situation. And the first section of this, the first six chapters, are sort of giving us the credibility of Daniel's relationship with God. So in spite of the whole nation being out in exile, there are peoples with that nation who've gone with the nation who are still in communication with God, and they are blessed through that relationship. Even though they're in exile, they're blessed. And then what it's doing for the reader, I think it's providing a foundation for what is coming in the next chapters, which is astonishing. If you hadn't had those previous chapters, you'd think, "Oh, this is it's somebody's dream." But to see the words of God coming through Daniel and his ability to interpret dreams, not just to interpret them, but to actually get what the dream was in the beginning, is really sort of putting that foundation down, saying this guy Daniel knows what he's talking about. He's got the ear of God, or God's got his ear, Daniel's ear. We need to listen to what he's actually going to say next. And that is how I see this, because they then come out of exile, and the nation changes actually in the following years.
And I think that's so. The base of this is so not only does it strengthen Daniel's message that he's about to bring, but it also kind of prepares us. for the message. And
Yeah.
I think there's something in this that when you get a message, oh, let's run away with this. Oh, what about this? What about that? Actually, the belt and braces are kind of like strapped in. You know, the seatbelt of Daniel is the first 6 chapters of this. It
Yeah.
shows us the integrity. It shows us how God overcomes. It shows us all those things. So when we start looking at the visions that Daniel
Mm.
has, and some of the things that go all the way to the end of time, probably in some of their understanding and interpretation, actually, it's not so that we run hither and thither and we panic about this and we panic about that. Actually, we need to do it from a position of security in God, recognizing
Mm.
that God's big kingdom will overcome everything. The great rock
Yeah.
will crush everything in its path. And actually, that's not something physical, it's not something political, it's spiritual, and it's
Yeah.
amazing. And actually, I think that's a powerful lesson to us when we feel under threat, when we're feeling squashed down, when we're feeling there's louder voices around, when we feel that we're not in the seat where we can command things to happen, when we feel that powerlessness of an exile, when we feel those things, we need to take the lessons of Daniel and take comfort in that and strengthen ourselves in God and recognize he will break through regardless.
Yeah. I
He,
think
yeah,
it's also Daniel is perhaps. I mean, I'm coming to realise that I'm in my daily readings. I'm back in Samuel and David
yeah,
and everything else. And although David had the heart of God, he did some amazingly awful things around that, and it was very violent and he did things. Daniel here, it just develops our knowledge of his relationship with God that is much deeper. I think I'm getting this sense that it's much deeper than David's relationship with God. I may be causing consternations there, but the way that Daniel here is he's praying constantly, praying three times a day he kneels down, but I'm sure it's not the only time he speaks with God. Um, he gets answers. He interprets things that God's trying to say to the kings, and he's really in tune. And I just find it incredible. I mean, as I'm reading it now, it's giving me more revelation as to who Daniel is than I've had before.
yeah,
And I think as it comes, because as you say, the following chapters are not just for the nation of Israel, the physical nation of Israel, but it's also for the spiritual nation, God's spiritual nation, who are us, for the future. And it's an interesting few chapters ahead of us.
yeah. And we've got a nice seatbelt, so we're not going to get too rocked. It's like,
That's right. That's right. Yeah,
yeah,
it's like the countdown to the launch of a rocket,
yeah,
really. The first 6 chapters.
yeah.
What's the volume? The volume's gone.
Okay. Can you hear
Well,
David, or is it just me?
it's all right. I'm all right, Jack.
Here, yeah.
I think it might be on your phone, Carolyn.
I'll go out and come back.
Okay. Any more thoughts, Jenny?
Not at the moment. No, I was just. I wasn't going to come on it really, but I'm just going to listen. But I said something in the end.
Yeah, you said something great. So and I think our security needs to be in Him, not systems around us. Our walk needs to be with Him, and I think this is something we really need to learn. Is actually for every person in church to be so connected with God that whatever circumstance they find themselves in, He breaks through, and that understanding that He breaks through. And I think that's so important in these days, because there's so many other things that can distract us. There's so many other things saying, oh, look at this, look at this. There's so many people asking us to jump on their bandwagon and sign their petitions and do this, that, and the other. But actually, with God, it's just, what are you saying to me? How are you leading me? And learning to listen to him and follow him, and that connection, two-way connection with him, is so important. So
I think it's confidence, isn't it, in our relationship with God. When God speaks to us,
yeah,
we can move in that, and you get the confidence through the relationship,
yeah,
building relationship. Pray without ceasing, rejoice in all things.
yeah, yeah. Well, I think we've come to a nice end there. So I'll come offline, and we will pick up on the prophecy, verse chapter 7 tomorrow, and follow through with that, which will be exciting stuff. So buckle in your seatbelts, and we'll be all ready to go. So thank you all for your comments. Thanks for your wisdom, your insights today, and insights on today as well, and the days we live in as well, and being secure in God. And so I'll move us offline. Thanks for joining us online. I understand about 4 with us today online. Thank you for that. I hope you enjoyed it, and God bless you.